Greetings and welcome to today's hour-long cut-up lesson thing. That's right, I still don't have a title. You'd think after 3 months it would happen, but here we are. Anyways, today we are painting this. It is another Misty mountain scene, except this time it is at sunrise. So you get more of those golden, oh, I'm dropping it. You get more of those golden yellows down here, which turn into oranges and mix with teals and blues. You just get a really wide array of subtle colors. I also added the pink cherry tree in here because I feel like it's a very unique color in nature. We find it in flowers, sometimes in the sky after it rains, but we don't see it all that often, and so I feel like it's just a fun way to add a splash of vibrant color into any painting. And with the morning sky colors being so subtle, it felt like a natural mix. So I really hope you enjoy today's Misty Mountain scene. As per usual, if you'd like help with the drawing process, you can find the digital sketch up over on Patreon. And if you'd like the full hour-long version, it's uncut, you can find that up over on Patreon. But there we have it. I really hope you enjoy. It's a different lesson, but soon we'll be getting into winter and kind of Christmassy themed things, which I'm very excited about. I have a winter cardinal right behind me, which we'll do very soon. But I hope you enjoy today's lesson, and let's jump into it. I'm going to begin here today with the larger square-headed brush. And I'm doing that because I want to block in a large area, and this is the perfect brush to do it because it is so large and it can hold so much paint. So I'm going to begin by dipping just the tip of the brush into some water. I'm not getting it up here because that's where the glue is and that's where it's bound. I don't want to over excessively work on that area. So it's just at the bottom, then I'm going to wipe it off slightly so the brush isn't wet but rather just damp. This is going to help the paint glide and extend the wet life of the paint itself. Then I'm going to grab some titanium white paint. I'm going to apply that to the back of my horizon. As you can see here, I'm starting at the bottom and then I'm slowly blending up. You can still see the drawing through it. Then I'm going to dip it in water, wipe it off a little bit, grab some more paint, and just continue to work upwards. Now it's time to start introducing some color. And I'm going to do that with a very, very subtle orange. Now we don't have orange on our palette, but we can make it very easily by taking some of our yellow. We'll move that down here. Use the other corner of the brush, take a little bit of red. Not too much. The yellow is a much weaker pigment, and the red can easily overtake it. So I'm going to take this, going to apply it to the bottom of our horizon. Then I can begin to blend up slowly. Then I'm going to take a little bit of red, just a tiny bit. I'm going to apply that right above our orange. It's going to leave us with a bit of a pink. Now I'm going to grab some blue, apply that to the top. As you can see, wipe off my brush a little bit. That way it isn't covered in blue entirely. Grab some titanium white and apply that up there as well. I'm working in an X-shaped pattern to move the paint about as I'm blending downwards. You can also work fairly sharply around our subjects if we want because of that nice square edge. Right now I'm wiping off my brush, getting it nice and clean. We'll grab some of that titanium white, apply it in the middle, blend both upwards and downwards. I want a nice bright sky in the distance. Now, coming back to the painting and reassessing it after seeing how much of this is dried, I found that it's still a little bit darker than what I'd like. So this is a perfect example of the fact that you don't have to get everything right the first time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my brush, make it a little bit wet, dry it off, grab some titanium white, going to apply it below, and then softly blend up yet again. Dipping in my water, grabbing some of that pure titanium white, applying, and blending yet again. We can even take a little bit of our blue, move that to a safe space on our palette, take a little bit of our white, mix something close to what we had, just like that. Want it to be a little bit more white heavy. You can see that I'm trying a couple of different variants until I get it as white as I want. Then we can work that down here as well. I'm not going to do much, but just enough to connect the areas so that they don't look like they're existing in halves. And now I'm going to switch over to my medium-sized square-headed brush, apply a little bit of water here. I'm going to go to my palette, and I've applied a little bit of that burnt umber we talked about. So I'm going to grab that, apply it right there. I'm going to grab some yellow, some red, mix up a nice warm burnt umber, grab some of our titanium white. Now we have a pigment like that. And this is what I'm going to start working on our mountains in the background with. I'm using the sharper edge of my brush to apply it. It's blending to a point with the previously applied pigment. Truly isn't a bad thing. It's making it more cohesive. The subjects in the background aren't going to have the natural coloring of the subject itself. It's going to be a combination of the subject and the surrounding areas and the lighting. Here we'll grab a little bit more burnt umber and we'll just build up. We don't want to get too dark here though. We are still in the background and we want the background to be fairly washed out for the most part. That way it doesn't distract from the foreground. And it looks like we have a nice, bright, diffusing light in the back. So we're just going to go back in, blend it out. The more we blend it, the more it'll adopt the other colors, and the more natural it will look in our painting. Now we're going to begin working on this one. And this one's a little bit closer, so I'm going to grab more of that burnt umber, move it down here, get a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow. We'll try applying that. It's not blending with the previously applied paint because this area of the canvas is fairly clean. Though as we get closer to us in the painting, farther away from this area here, the pigments are going to get a little bit more cool, a little bit more blue, because you'll get the reflected light from here, not there. I'm also going to take some time to apply a little bit of Mars Black to my palette. There that is. And I'm using this because I'm going to want to desaturate the pigments a little bit. All of that is very desaturated because we used a lot of white. But here we can't use as much white because we want it to be darker. But if we just use the natural burnt umber, it's going to be very saturated. It's going to be a very saturated burnt umber. So what we're going to need to do is take a little bit of our titanium white, a tiny, tiny bit of our Mars Black. It's a very strong pigment. It will dilute everything else very quickly. So we'll do that, and then we'll mix it all into our burnt umber. And here you can see it's much less saturated than what we had before. So now I'll take that, or just try applying it. We're going to begin working on this mountain right here. So this one is going to be a little bit darker, it's farther away from the light. It's going to be a little bit more saturated. It's going to be a little bit more of its natural color. So we'll go with a good amount of brown, a good amount of Mars Black, a little bit of titanium white, and then we'll go back in and add some highlights from colors that are similar like that and build on top of it. So let's begin here. Grab a good amount of burnt umber, a little bit of Mars Black. We'll mix this over what we had before so we can see the real difference that we're creating. And then I'll just begin to block it in. Now you could use the larger square-headed brush if you wanted to save a little bit of time. It would give you those sharp edges, and it would apply the paint quite well. So now along the edges, I want it to be a little bit brighter. So what I'm actually thinking about right now is how we're going to do that. Do we want it to be just a brighter brown, or do we want it to have more of those colors? I think right now we're going to make it a brighter brown, and then later in the painting we'll go back in and we'll add the highlights from the back. And that way it's a much more streamlined, easy process of going about it. It means that this won't be entirely finished for a long time, and we'll go on to work on other areas. But when we come back to it, we'll be coming back to this, portions of the tree, everything, and we'll just be adding those correct highlights there. So right now I'm going to take some of our burnt umber, I'm going to make a new little patch here on the palette. I'm going to grab some titanium white. There we go. It's nice and desaturated because it's more titanium white than it is burnt umber, and it looks quite good with that. It will of course blend here as well with our initial application, making it a little bit darker. So I'm starting on the edge, nice clean line, then I blend inwards a little bit. As you can see, because we're using water, we're thinning the paint, we can see through portions of this, but as we go on and we add additional layers, things get a lot better. Then I'm going to grab my old square-headed brush. And this will just be a rough layer because we'll need to redo it once we do all of this here. But for now, we'll grab some of our yellow. Watch this. Do you see what it's turning into? It's a green. When Mars Black and Primary Yellow come together, they actually make a green. We're using this brush because it gives us all of these different strokes and it makes it look a little bit more scratchy, a lot like grass. And that's essentially going to be our first layer. We need to let that dry fully before we do anything more though. Then I'm going to go to my palette and I'm going to try to recreate a color similar to that for the fog and mist in the far distance. And I'm going to do so with a good amount of titanium white, because we know we did the initial layer of a titanium white, we added some in the mix, and then we had to do an additional layer on top of it. So we're starting with that, then we're going to grab some primary yellow, we're going to grab a little bit of primary red, again not too much of the red, not too little either. Try that. It's a little bit too much, it's okay. Grab some more yellow. We have a nice orange there. We begin mixing that in with our white. What we have here looks fairly similar, so we'll give it a try. Going to begin moving it down and moving my brush in a fairly round shape. As we get towards the edge here, I'm moving up along the sharp edge. I'm doing more of that round application. Now if you get your brush fairly wet, you can really move up the mountains, create some nice subtlety, just by dragging the existing pigment that we have on our canvas. There we are. Now that the piece is fairly dry, I'm going to grab some more titanium white, move that into our mixture, and yet again do another little application separating that bottom rock there from the mist. I'm doing a bit of a tapping effect there, as you can see. I like the tapping effects, and I also like the little circular effects. Create little pieces of mist that are coming up. I'm going to take a little bit more. I'm actually going to throw it right here, show that it's working its way through and in between some of the mountain passes. See what I'm doing? We can do some up here as well. What we're going to do now is work on our grass yet again. Going to grab the old square-headed brush, going to grab some of our primary yellow, going to scrape this up as you can see. See all the little line work in there? It's happening because the brush is just breaking off into so many little strands. Then we'll grab some pure Mars black, work that down there, begin to blend outwards, get more of a nice dark green. Now we'll switch over to the smaller square-headed brush. Going to dip it in water. And the water is very green right now, but that's okay because we're working on a tree. It's going to be brown, and a little bit of green in it isn't going to be a bad thing. So I'm going to grab some burnt umber, a little bit of Mars black, a little bit of titanium white, get a nice thick pigment, be fairly desaturated here. We'll add some more burnt umber. Remember, the more white and black you add to it, the more thick it will be. We'll begin to draw in our tree here. As I move up in the tree, I'm applying less pressure with my brush, which is allowing me to get a much smaller stroke. When you apply a lot of pressure to your brush, the bristles will expand. You get a much larger application. We should definitely add in a little bit of highlight. So I'll show you what that looks like first. And that's simply taking some primary yellow, some primary red. Primary red starting to dry. We need to go into it a little bit. There we go. We'll grab some burnt umber. Make a really nice warm brown here. Then we'll get a lot of titanium white. We'll mix that up. Keep a little bit on the side for a real highlight. Move a good amount of it into what we have. Then we're going to tap along the edges, a little bit of a highlight. And I'm tapping it because I want it to have a little bit of a rough aesthetic. Because I want it to look like the bark is protruding in different areas randomly. Now we are going to jump right back into our painting with our old square-headed brush. We've washed it a couple times, so it might be advantageous to just kind of peel the bristles back, add a little bit of pressure. That way we get that inconsistency for that dabbing motion that we're about to use. Now I'm going to take some of our titanium white paint. I'm going to take some of our primary red paint. Going to blend the two together into a nice pink. So we're going to start here by just dabbing on some little applications. We're going to start with a very sparse tree, and then we're going to build up to a tree with a good amount of foliage. There, you can see it's really showing up there. There we are. Getting close to finishing, and I have all of the implied markings that I want, so I'm going to clean this brush quite well. I'm going to grab the smaller square-headed brush. I'm going to grab some burnt umber, some Mars black. We're going to redraw in some of these branches here. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.